Welcome to WholeCEO with Lisa G. I'm the best-selling author of The Boss Weight Loss. I'm bringing you the top tips to be unstoppable. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually pull up a chair with today's top experts in mindset, weight loss, business, and more. Learn our top tips so that you can have more energy, be fit and resilient, feel unstoppable, unshakable, and unbreakable. Get ready to be inspired as we welcome our guest today, a remarkable woman who has conquered the world's 7 second summits and recently became a world record holder. But her journey goes far beyond mountaineering. It's a testament to resilience, motivation, and the exhilaration of her achievement. Her book, Quit Proof, The 7 Necessities for Becoming Resilient, will be released in January 2024. So let's welcome to the podcast a mom of 7 kids who boldly inspired and brazenly challenged her, focusing on ambitious entrepreneurs to leverage a life of success into a life of significance. Inspired speaker Jenn Drummond, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
When I read your story, I was like, wow, everybody needs resilience these days. But you are an exemplary example of that yourself. So why don't we jump in with a little bit more on your story and what inspired you?
Yeah. So I got into a car accident in 2018 that should have taken my life and didn't. And I just remember thinking like, wow, I was saved. Like, why am I here? What's my purpose? All those stories. And then add to it a few weeks after the accident, a girlfriend of mine was running on a trail that you could push a stroller down. And she slipped, hit her head, and died instantly, never to return home. And I just remember thinking, I survived this horrific car accident where my car rolled 3 times and all this different kind of stuff. She's doing something that's healthy and she doesn't get to come home. And I knew at that point, we don't get to choose when we die, but we sure get to choose how we live. And so it's very important for me to start living and just doing everything I can to make the most out of this life. So I started thinking about what I wanted to do. I had my 40th birthday coming up in 2020, and I decided that I wanted to climb a mountain called Ama de Blanc. I had asked friends that were into mountaineering, if you could climb one mountain in the whole world, what mountain would it be? The general consensus was Ama de Blanc. It's the logo for the Paramount Pictures. So if you've seen the Paramount Pictures logo, that's the mountain behind their name.
I didn't know the origin story there.
Yeah. So then I'm training for AMA. The universe has another plan for all of us because COVID strikes. And all of a sudden now I'm homeschooling 7 kids. And one of my kids is struggling with his math homework one day. And I'm like, listen, buddy, we do hard things. You've got this. And he goes, if we do hard things, why are you climbing a mountain called Ama de Blanc instead of a real mountain, Mount Everest? And I said, Ama de Blanc, not Ama de Blanc. But thanks, honey. Cute. And then he did his homework and we looked at Everest. And by the end of the week, I had a coach and was training for Ama de Blanc and Everest. And the coach gave me a book to read that was about training for mountaineering. So I ordered the book. In the front of it, there was a story of a lady who got a Guinness World Record for skiing across the Alps. And like half joking to my coach, I'm like, I could have done that. Like I could have gotten a Guinness World Record and my kids would think I'm the coolest mom in the whole world, because right now being a homeschool teacher is not really a cool mom. Like I'm not winning the cool mom award at all. And he goes, all right, well, I'll think of something. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm just not growing pumpkins or speed eating hot dogs. And I kind of let it go. And then he calls me back a few weeks later and he's like, Jenn, I got a perfect record for you. I'm like, okay, yeah. It's like, I think you should be the first female to climb the 7 second summits. I'm like, I don't even know what the second summits are. Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, it's the second highest point on each continent. They're harder than the first 7. They've never been done by a female before. 7 continents, 7 mountains, 7 kids. Sounds like a jackpot. I think you should do it.
That's crazy. So
that
was a challenge that was thrown down. Had you ever climbed a serious mountain before?
I mean, I'd done the Grand Teton in Jackson, in Jackson Hole. But like, let's be honest, the Grand Teton's around 13,000 feet, right? I
Yeah,
mean, all
that's a
these.
lot for regular folks.
Yeah. Right. I mean, so it's something, but when it comes to like big mountaineering, it's not 28,000 feet or 20 some thousand feet, right? It's just a different gig. But I had done that and I loved it. I loved my experience, which then allowed me to say yes to this one. And this one was just a little bit on steroids and super fun.
Well, I'm impressed, first of all, just by the 7 kid part. I mean, that's a lot. Looking at you, it doesn't even seem possible that you've had 7 kids. Then the 7 summits of the second largest summits. So obviously you did them all. And
Yeah.
I really want to talk to you a lot about the topic of resilience, because I obviously, after you almost died, your friend died, you had a choice. Like you had a choice, like, what does this mean? What does it mean for me? How can I show up and have a message of resilience? And what tips you have for our audience on how we too can be resilient?
Yes, right. I mean, I think resilience is so important because it's on the other side of discomfort that
Yeah.
we grow and expand and get to experience more, right? Like when I tell my kids we do hard things, a hard thing for you might be a different than a hard thing for me, right? Like we have different hard things based on who we are. But
Right.
anything that we're not used to doing or comfortable doing, that's hard. We need to have resilience to be able to break that hard into easier bite-sized bits to be able to do it. And then we get to achieve so much more of life. We get to see so much more of life. We get to experience so much more of life. And I really feel learning how to develop that resilience muscle allows us a better life. So we owe it to ourselves to be able to step into that and really hone the discipline and break down the things that are standing in our way so that we can overcome.
Yeah, I mean, for me too, I love this topic of resilience and grit, and that's why I launched the whole podcast to help others bounce back from what was really a hard time for me, I'd say. And there's been lots of hard times, and I love that you start your kids young with doing hard things. Like for me, I know I've done lots of hard things. Like when I was younger, I did a marathon, but one of the hard things for me was speaking. And I've decided that I'm going to get into speaking because it's a hard thing for me. Like everybody else is like, well, you do this. I'm like, well, you don't know emotionally and mentally how many layers of stuff I had to even find my voice, because just speaking, I would lose my voice just trying to talk in public. So I find that I'm always after just resilience and grit myself, showing up that it's possible. And what other lessons do you have about determination, motivation, resilience, and grit for our audience?
Yeah. Well, I'll give a story from when I stepped into the school. I had no idea that I had a fear of heights, like zero idea, because I'd been on chairlifts, I've been in skyscrapers, nothing really bothered me. Well, then when I got on a rock wall, because the wall in Kenya is a rock climb, after about 10 feet in the air, I started getting sick and wobbly and nervous. I'm like, oh my goodness, like, where did this come from? What's going on? And I climbed back down. My coach is like, oh, you must have a fear of heights. I'm like, how do I have a fear? Like, I just said I'm going to do this goal. How do I have a fear of heights? What do I do? He's like, well, we're going to have to work it out of you. I'm like, okay, well, like, let's get it out of me. Is there a pill? Because it'd be really nice if there's a pill, right? He goes, no, he goes, I need you to go back up that wall and just go one handhold higher. And then, so I'd go one handhold higher and I'd come back down. And I go up the wall and I go one handhold higher and come back down. And being able to break it up into those little pieces allowed me to work through my fear manageably. And now I can climb those walls without having fear. Magically enough, like after 35 feet in the air, I didn't have a fear of heights anymore. It was like everything was small enough that it didn't feel like it was that close that something bad was going to happen. So I think that's like really important, is breaking things into bite-sized bits. And then I also think like knowing that other people are watching, or knowing that whatever we're doing is advancing everybody. It's
Right.
impacting everybody that's around us. So for me, having 7 children makes it a lot easier, I think, when I'm in a hard spot, like say a spot in the mountain where I'm scared, or a spot where maybe I don't want to have a difficult conversation, even though it's important to have. I think about my kids. I say, would I want Jack to have this? Or would I want Jack to see me get over this? Or I want Jack to be able to do these things. And if I can say yes to that, then it's like, okay, well, I have to do this because I'm his parent and I'm modeling to him what's possible. And so it gives me the courage knowing that I'm doing it for him, not just for myself. And for those of us that don't have kids, you know, there is something that you're passionate about. Maybe it's even your inner child or your younger self that you're like, hey, I want somebody to stick up for me like this. So here's what I'm going to do. And I borrow courage from that avatar to make the thing happen.
Well, there's so much to unpack there. I love the fact that you talk about doing hard things in small steps and that you talk about being purpose driven. And I would love to also jump into a little bit of being quit proof and hear how you can tie all this stuff into being quit proof, because that's such a great title.
Yes, I know. I'm like, I can't believe the title's not taken already. And the book is available for pre-order right now, but it's coming out in January, which I think
Yeah,
is the perfect year for a book with that title to come out,
yeah.
because that's when we start saying, like, wait a minute, what am I doing? So for me, quit proof means that you're expanding and growing. Okay. Like, so first of all, you have to decide, what does even quitting mean? And then how do you become quit proof? So I believe you're not quitting if you're expanding and growing. So for example, I wanted to be a pilot once. I thought, like, I flew on a friend's private plane. We had this amazing experience. I said, oh my goodness, it took me longer to walk to TSA than through TSA. This exists. And so after I got back from that trip, I signed up to take a pilot's class, because I'm like, I'm going to get my pilot's license and fly a private plane and I'm done with commercial. So I
Yeah.
sign up for this class and I take it. I love it in the beginning. And then I start not loving it, because I realize when you're a pilot, you want like everything to be as boring as possible. Boring is winning. Exciting when you're a pilot means there's problems. And so the entire time you're flying the plane, you're looking out the front window and you're thinking, okay, if something went wrong, here's where we'd land. If something went wrong, there's where we'd land. And
Right.
then when you're done checking that, then you're checking all the gauges to make sure everything's lit up and doing what it's supposed to be doing. And then for 2 seconds, you're like, oh, wow, this is a pretty view. And then the rest of the time, you're like troubleshooting if something were to happen, what you would do, and making sure nothing bad happens. I would come home from those classes. I have 7 kids. I'd be scanning my entire environment at the house, being like, what's going to go wrong? Where are we going to land? How are we going to fix this? Instead of looking at all the pretty and the beauty and the magic of having a big family, I was looking at all the problems or things that could turn into a problem. And so then I wasn't a really good attitude to bring home, and I didn't have a great way of switching that off. So finally, I was about a day away from getting my actual pilot's license. They told me to call my insurance company. I called my insurance company. They're like, yeah, you can get your pilot's license, but you're going to have your premiums go up 5x. I'm sitting there thinking, I don't even really like this anymore. My premiums are going to go through the roof. I don't even like I tried flying with my kids, and the entire time they were swatting each other, wondering where the television was and wondering why, like I asked them to play the silent game for the 1,000th time. So I realized flying and managing them at the same time was not going to be probable. So
Right.
I quit by all means, right? Like I quit doing it, but I don't really define that as quitting, because I took it to a spot where I learned, I expanded, I have a better understanding, I know more about myself, and that isn't a path that I want to pursue. So now I can take that energy home and go do something else and pivot. Now, if I came home and it was like grumpy and I'm like, and did nothing with that space or energy, that's quitting. But when you take something, you're like, hey, I know this about me. I know this about this experience now. I want to do something different. Now you're still pivoting, you're expanding and growing in another area. And that's how we become quit proof. And there's a lot of other strategies that we need to employ to make sure that we have the energy to do the things that set our heart on fire.
I love that story, because I thought you were going to say, well, I didn't quit because if I take something on, I'm going to finish it no matter what. But I realized that you had the intelligence to realize it wasn't going to work for you. 7 kids, you don't want to be always looking for the problems. You want to be looking for the fun, to inspire them to have a fun life. So I admire that it's instead a lesson of knowing when to pivot and not just going for the thing because you said you were going to do it to keep your word to yourself, but realizing, thinking about it, this isn't going to work for me, and being empowered to decide that. Like I thought about flying before and I'm like, this looks like fun, similar
Yeah.
experience. Then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I got to learn how to land this thing. That part was scary.
Right. Like I'm not gonna park in a car. I don't know if you really want me to park an airplane, but let's see, right?
Yeah, like
Um,
once you're up there, like taking the wheel for a while seems fun. But
yep.
yeah, I think that having that inner knowing and knowing enough to listen to your inner knowing is so important.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Definitely. And I think a lot of people, when I was climbing, what I learned in climbing is when I first went to Everest, for some reason, I thought you just started at base camp and went all the way up to the top. And it just took that long to climb Everest. When I got to Everest, I realized you get to base camp and then you might go up to camp 1 or camp 2. And then your body gets stressed out because of the lack of oxygen in the environment. So
Yeah.
then you come all the way back down to base camp. And that stressed out feeling changes your chemistry and your blood, and it makes you make more red blood cells. So that happens at base camp for a little bit, and then you'll go back up the mountain again, and you'll go to maybe camp 3. Now it's easier to get to camp 3 because physiologically you changed, but then you might go to camp 3 and come all the way back down to base camp. So I used to think like, oh, if you went down to base camp, like you were quitting or whatever, it's like you gave up. And it's actually, that example showed me that sometimes we have to move forward, take the lesson, take the change in our body, come back to base camp to kind of integrate it, feel the benefit, and then be able to push forward going further. So if there comes a time where you want to quit, that just means like you're hitting your max. And that means you need to come back home, integrate the lesson. And if you want to get back out there, by all means, get back out there. That's part of the process of moving forward. It doesn't mean you quit and gave up unless you decide not to do that thing anymore. It just means that, hey, you went as far as you could based on your current circumstances. You're going to come back home. You're going to get stronger. Now you can go further.
Wow. I just love your message of resilience and grit and listening to your inner knowing about quitting and then coming back stronger and taking the lesson. So what would you say is your last piece of knowledge that you want to drop on our audience about being unstoppable? And let's just say we've tried the things, it didn't work, how to keep going, being a mom of 7 who tells your kids they have to do the hard things. What would you say to our audience?
I'm going to tell you to savor the climb. Listen, when you climb these mountains, you get to the summit and you're on the summit for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then you need to come back home. And if you did all that sacrifice and all that work and all that training and all those things for those 10 minutes, you missed like 99.9% of the journey. And so if you're going for something, I want you to tell yourself, like, I'm going to achieve this. I'm going to summit that mountain. So my goal now isn't to poke energy into whether I'm going to summit or not. You've already declared that you're summiting. Now where you need to put energy is, how do you make it fun? How do you make it enjoyable? How do you have a good time getting from point A to B? Because that's really where the wins come in, and that's finding joy in the journey. And that allows you to celebrate the everyday, because our life is 99% everyday moments. And if you can find joys in those, the summit's a beautiful thing, but it doesn't even matter if you don't make it.
I love that part. That totally escaped me when I first started down my entrepreneurial journey, not for the first time, but like 7 years ago. Okay, I'm going to build an email list. It's going to be easy. I'm going to do all the things. It wasn't easy, wasn't as promised. And at the same time, I totally forgot to enjoy the journey. I didn't have really boundaries about when I would work and when I would play. And it took a pandemic to really shake me up into doing less and just enjoying my life for the first time in 6 years. I'm like a different standard for how I want to live my life and make it more fun. So thank you for that wonderful message. I can't wait to get your book. Where can people find you, Jenn Drummond?
Yes. I have a website, jenndrummond.com, and the book right now is available on Amazon for pre-order. So please order.
I'll be getting that. Thanks again for being a great guest on WholeCEO with Lisa G. Thanks for coming to WholeCEO with Lisa G. After over 20 years helping people lose weight and get fit, I'm so excited to announce that I found the missing link with my coaching. Message me if you want to learn how to look better, feel better, and go faster with a master. Lisa G at lisagfit.com.